Good morning, lovelies. Good morning, my friends. What is your reason? Take two. What is your reason? Let's talk about it. Jesus, coffee. Like being mid-live and your wife comes in. Anyway, so, all right, let's talk about what is our reason. What is our reasoning for going to church? What's your reason for going to the church that you go to? Is it because of the people there that you hang out with? Is it because you have a cool position in the church? Is it because, well, that's always where I've gone? It's where I went as a kid. So, what's your reasoning for going to the church that you go to? Let's look at all of that. Because that matters. You know, am I going for fellowship? Or am I going for, am I going there for fellowship, or am I going there to be taught? Am I going there to deepen my relationship with the Lord? Or do they have a really cool Starbucks and I'm getting my, they got a really good Starbucks in there and I got just banging coffee on Sunday morning? What's your reason for going? Is it, well, I got this cool position, and there's only a couple passages really that talk about church per se. I mean, we know that Paul was off developing and building the church. Because remember, church is the people, not the steeple. Right? The steeple, the building that we walk into, is just where we corporately gather to worship. And that's actually talked about in Matthew 18. Jesus talks a lot about corporate worship in Matthew 18. He actually talks about discipline and how the church should handle discipline in Matthew 18 as well, talking about how the church handles discipline and admonishment, not individually. We see that in Matthew 7, right? Before you try and remove the speck from your brother's eye, make sure you don't have a plank hanging out from your own eye, you hypocrite. Right? So, but he goes in verse 19 and verse 20 in Matthew. It says, again, I say to you that if two of you agree on earth about anything that they may ask, it shall be done for them by my Father who's in heaven. For where two or three have gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst. So when we gather and we're corporately worshiping, guess who's there? Jesus is there. Are we going there thinking about being in his presence? Do we think that he's just hanging out up in heaven, and no, he's there in our midst with us, right? So we gather and we corporately worship. But what's our reason for going there? What's our reason for that building being the one that we corporately worship in? Being the one that we're getting taught in? What's our reasoning for that church? What's our reasoning for that building? Well, I got a really cool position and I love it. Great. Are you being fed? And is your family being fed? Because men, you ultimately need to make sure that your family's being fed. All right, it's not just you being fed, but your family has to be fed too. Because don't forget, you are the spiritual head of the household. So you need to make sure that everybody is getting fed. Kids, make sure that the Sunday school is doing a good job of feeding them well. And if your church has an adult Sunday school, some do, some don't. Ours doesn't have an adult Sunday school. We have family groups, which you have a leader of the family group, and they meet a couple times a week, but they don't meet every Sunday. Our church is a little different that way. I've talked to a bunch of friends, and they have a Sunday school where they're giving a lesson every week before church or after church, whichever. But anyway, you need to make sure that everybody's being fed and being fed well, right? For me personally, that's my reason for attending Christian Family Chapel here in Jax. I pass no less than 8 to 9 churches on my way to CFC. Why do I choose CFC? Because I get fed there by Doug, our pastor. I get fed and fed well. Right? Every time I'm coming away from a teaching, I'm coming away with conviction, which is the Holy Spirit saying, hey, we need to correct this. You should be feeling that every time, because that's the Holy Spirit teaching you something through that message. Trying to correct an area in your life through that message. So God's speaking directly to you right there. But what's your reason for attending there? And that's something that we really need to be thinking about. Why? Why are we going there? Well, it's the most popular church in Jacksonville. Well, no, CFC is not. But I don't stop and run to the one that is. Why? Nothing wrong with. There's a huge church here in Jacksonville called 1122. Good church. Joby's a good pastor. He's expository teacher. He's a good pastor. Good church. It's just not where God led me. Right? He led me to CFC, so we have to pay attention to where we're being led to. And we have to focus. Again, it all comes down to what you're reasoning. So, I talked to a friend of mine last night, and this topic came up, and we discussed it, and I was like, I think this would be a good topic to discuss just as a whole, as a family, right? Like, why? Just kind of bring awareness and bring thought. I've seen others run away from a church too. Why? Well, I don't know. When you're looking for a church, let me just tell you, if you're in a church hunt, the perfect one doesn't exist. Not on this spinning rock, the perfect one doesn't exist. You may think yours is perfect, but it's not the perfect one. I'll bet you there's probably been somebody that's left that church because they felt they got hurt at that church for some reason. Right? We have to remember that, what's the purpose of what that church is doing? And that leads me to the other passage I want to get to, which comes in Mark 11. The context behind this is Jesus has flipped the tables because he watched a bunch of negative behavior happening inside the temple, and he was not about it. They were defiling his Father's house. So what's he saying in verse 17? Actually, let's pick up in verse 15. Then they, disciples, came to Jerusalem. And this comes post his triumphal entry, right? Then they came to Jerusalem and entered the temple and began to drive out those who were buying and selling in the temple and overturn the tables of the money changers and the seats to those who were selling doves. Jesus was righteously angry here because two things were happening. First of all, the house was being defiled. But not only the house was being defiled, and I've touched on this topic before, there was unethical behavior happening in there. The reason they were in there selling, why are they in there selling animals, Jim? Because individuals who were coming to Jerusalem for the Passover that couldn't afford to bring animals with them, they would purchase the animals, sacrificial animals, in the temple so that they could partake in the Passover. But what you see here is the vendors are driving up the prices and they're price gouging for these animals. And those who were less fortunate couldn't afford. They couldn't afford the price of the animals. So they couldn't partake in Passover. So because of somebody's greediness, somebody is not able to partake. Somebody's not able to participate in Passover. And that made Jesus very, very angry that this was happening. He would not permit anyone to carry merchandise through the temple. He began to teach and say to them, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer, and for all the nations'? But you have made it a robber's den." What's he say? My house shall be called a house of prayer. Is there a lot of prayer happening in your church? Are people praying for each other? Or are people just there gathering in their social cliques? If you're walking into a church and you see individuals you've never seen before, what should you do? Make yourself known. Go welcome them. Hey, how you doing? I'm Jim. I've just never seen you before. I don't know if make yourself known. Just go up and introduce yourself to them. If they're new, guess what? That could be their first time walking into that church. And that makes a difference. Let me tell you, that makes a big difference when you're welcomed, when you feel like you're seen. Right? I don't need to be celebrated walking into a new church, but I at least want to be seen, right? So, why are you going to church? What's your reason? Think about it. And then we've touched on a couple different areas, talked about a couple different things. Think about what's your reason for what you're going to church. What's your priority? Is it because I have a cool position at the church I like serving in? They got a cool cafe. I got some cool friends there. Where does growth and relationship with Christ come? Where does that fall on that list? Because if anything else falls in front of that, church may be becoming an idol. Just saying. Right? So just think about that. Write down 5 reasons why you attend the church that you attend. And then sit and prioritize. Prioritize those. What's the number one reason I go to that church? 2, 3, 4, 5. If you can come up with 5. Prioritize them. And then look at that list and pray over it. Pray through it. So, I love you. He loves you like crazy. We'll be back Monday with whatever Dad wants to talk about.